Whatever happened to Camazotz? After his initial release, Camazotz was considered weak by most. He had strong power scalings for the most part, but his kit didn't have any sort of hard CC that would allow him to get his damage off safely compared to other assassins, and he didn't quite have enough other benefits to justify picking him over anything else. In addition, he had quite a few clunky issues, especially regarding his ultimate. His ultimate was very short, so you basically had to get your 3 hits off right away if you wanted to do anything with them, meaning you didn't have much time to position yourself properly or aim. He also was blocked by any kind of a player-made wall if it came up during the ultimate, so he couldn't fly through it with his ult. And he had some issues with his 2, meaning that if somebody, for example, had Winged Blade or any other way of removing the slow, the dot would be removed along with it. This generally left him a very unfavored pick overall. In patch 3.20, he got various buffs that specifically addressed those issues. The cooldown on his Screech was reduced from 15 to 13 seconds just to give him ability to use that a bit more often. His Vampire Bats 2 was now fixed so the slow and damage was separated, meaning that Winged Blade would no longer cleanse the damage. And the slow got its own visual indication along with it, seeing that the slow was one part visual and the other part visual was the dot. His ultimate was also changed. The duration of the ult was increased from 3 to 4 seconds, giving you some more room to aim the ability. And it was now able to go through player-made deployables, so any kind of wall like Thor wall or Ymir wall. This put Camazotz in a little bit of a more favored spot for a while. He was picked up a little more in casuals and ranked. He also saw some competitive play in solo lane, but generally speaking, he was still not among the favored gods and more of a rare niche pick, because usually he would need a whole team focused around making up for the CC that he's lacking. Recently, we have seen a massive spike in Camazotz being played, especially in the SPL, and there are a few factors that led to that and kind of combine to a massive boost for this character in total, and that's what we're going to talk about. One crucial part of this happened in patch 4.7. Camazotz received another buff on April 25th, including 2 abilities being buffed. One was his passive, Essence Drinker. Camazotz would now drink essence pools at full speed at all times, whether or not he is in combat. This was probably more of a minor change in most situations, as you usually don't necessarily have a pool around while fighting. It is a benefit in a boxing scenario where there's a pool around you. You can just stay around the pool and just heal up a little bit while keeping up with the trade, and no one will really be able to box you down most of the time, but it's not the core buff of this patch. The core buff is in Devour. The brief delay on Devour sleep was removed. This meant that Camazotz would now be untargetable as soon as he activates the ability, because the leap would begin right away instead of with that slight delay it had beforehand. This delay was actually holding him back a lot in regards to any sort of CC. You could CC him out of his leap quite often, which is pretty rough when your leap is already very short. With this buff, the ability became a lot stronger. You can see similar things if you look at a Willish, whose 2 can be used to avoid various abilities and is very strong as such. Only that a Willish's 2 Feather Step can only be activated after hitting an enemy with a basic attack first, and it's also her main damage tool, so you have to be kind of considerate with that. Not so much with Devour, where the ability is often just used as an escape tool and not as the main damage tool, depending on how you level, and is usually just used for the main purpose of avoiding certain amounts of damage from the enemy, whereas the ultimate is better off being used as a full-on escape if you need it. There was more that happened in the same patch. Runeforged Hammer was buffed. Now this is more of a minor thing for Camazotz because you can build it but you don't have to build it, though he is very strong with it. Combining it with his slow and his generally high damage, you can get some additional damage spikes through it. As such, having Runeforged Hammer with that extra damage and extra health really helps a character like Camazotz, who also revolves a decent amount around sustaining, and for that having a bigger health pool in the first place can be very beneficial. Again, more of a minor change, as you definitely don't have to build this every single game. A more prevalent change, more important change, happened 2 patches later in patch 4.9, and that was the buff to Shifter's Shield. Shifter's Shield got a 50 gold price decrease through Tower Shield, and also received an additional 10 power, so 70 power over 50% health, and 50 protections each under 50% health. As such, this item brought multiple benefits for Camazotz. While Camazotz's passive heals from percentage health, and as such benefits a little more from a bigger health pool, his 2 does not. His 2 actually heals flat values, so having more protections gives you more effective health in that regard through the extra sustain. Same for the lifesteal from his basics, and also his 2 scales heavily with his power. It has 100% scaling on the heal, and the flat value of the heal itself is very low. Therefore, building big power items like Shifter's Shield really benefits Camazotz, and the overall tankiness of the item also benefits him in his survivability, making up a bit more for the fact that he doesn't have the best escape outside of his ultimate. And that brings us to the last very impactful change, which is more so in the meta. We have moved into a meta where Sunder is probably the most important relic. Is enough of a topic for another video, but what's worth pointing out here is that Sunder is picked up very often, very early on multiple characters that can get away with it, and Camazotz is definitely one of those. Camazotz can avoid a variety of abilities, and he has CC immunity in his ultimate. He can therefore get out of pretty much anything somehow. And with his generally high sustain, that opens up the relic slot for something like Sunder very much, more than for other characters. With the game being a lot about early aggression, especially pushing out the enemy in the first wave and invading their camps, you can see how Camazotz plays a major role here. He has an AoE swing in his basic attack chain, allowing him to clear that first wave relatively quickly. He has very high early aggression and damage potential, and if you don't watch out, you can get killed by him in the very first wave, while his chances of being killed are significantly lower, and therefore he has a very good chance of invading the buff camp as well. If you try to prevent the invade, you'll most likely find yourself in a situation where you eat his 2 plus Sunder and die before you can even do anything. So the meta leaves him in a very, very good place to get early pressure going, which is very important, especially in competitive, and as such, he will be picked a lot more. Obviously, he still has his downsides. There's still his lack of hard CC, but with his general style, his builds being much more favorable for him, his high aggression being really rewarding at the moment, and early pressure being so important for the game in general, it doesn't harm him too much that he lacks in other departments, but it should still be considered when building a team around Camazotz. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this, feel free to click the sub button or maybe the bell. It really helps me out. Other than that, see you for the next one tomorrow. ZiSotto, out.